NPS is such a controversial metric these days. We don't see a lot of correlation between NPS scores and renewals or churn. Sometimes we're very confused about what are we going to do next when we receive a lower than 8 score on any given survey response. And what are we going to do about it? Well, today I may have the answer to what is the complex index that we in customer success needs to start looking at and potentially replace the NPS score altogether. Well, I have a special guest today for us. His name is Stephen Fulkerson. He works at TSIA, which is a research organization. We'll talk a little bit about what is this organization and why should you know about it and who is it for. But I can tell you that Stephen is a very, very smart guy. He heads the customer success research practice at TSIA, and he came up with a new methodology called the Core Score framework. And with that, I want to dedicate the session to explore what this framework is and potentially give you an alternative way to figure out how strong is your renewal, retention, expansion, relationship with your customers that can completely replace the NPS score and give you the benchmark you need to see how are you doing versus other companies in your industry. And with that, Stephen, welcome to our show.
Hi, Reed.
Stephen, how would you frame TSIA? It's a long-standing organization. How long has it been out there, and how would you define it?
Yeah, we're well over 20 years, working on 25. So, yeah, our fearless leader is JB Wood, and he and Thomas Law leads our research department in all assets and facets of research. Yeah, we are a for-profit research company, and we try to provide organizations with research and data and insights so that they can make real-time decisions with unbiased data in the hopes of saving you millions of dollars in mistakes. A great example, last year I did a big research study on monetizing customer success. And I was trying to look at the behavior of the market from 2023 to when we did the study in 2020. 2020, we were a profitable organization, not we as in TSIA, but customer success writ large out in the industry was very profitable. And when I looked at the performance of the industry in 2023, we were doing a terrible job. So what that meant, is people were not reading my research. People were not joining TSIA and reading what we were subscribing and what we were proposing and what we were saying is truth in the market. So we try to make sure that the data is unbiased. It's coming from members. It's coming from non-members for those that participate in outside of TSIA membership. And it's insightful. I would be scared to be an executive in customer success in this market and be making decisions, gambling that I'm doing the right things. And I think the best way you talked about it, where you said one of your customers was looking at how they were under or overfunded. Yeah, it's like the benchmark, regardless of the membership, if you're a TSI member, you get a benchmark. And it's kind of like going to the doctor, listens to your pulse, looks at your eyes, looks up your nose, looks in your ears, listens to your heart. Yeah, they get a cursory view of your overall appearance. It doesn't mean much until they get the blood work. Then when you start looking at HDLs and LDLs and triglycerides and you start getting all of into the weeds here, then all of a sudden your health takes a different perspective. And that's what we try to do with our members is we dig in, look at through the benchmark, how they're performing and give them guidance and direction. So they're not spending millions of dollars on activities that yield no value.
100%. Just one word about monetizing customer success. I worked with a few of TSIA members, obviously large companies, enterprise companies, and one of them became a client of mine, and we set up the customer success organization. And I bet she just read your research and your recommendations, your framework, and she decided on the first year that she set up the customer success function is that she's going to monetize it. And I believe she literally followed your framework to the letter. Her organization was able to recoup millions of dollars in revenue in year one. So that propelled giving her a budget for a customer success technology, which we probably all know what most enterprise companies choose without giving them too much free commercial here. She was able to get so much more people to join her organization because she was self-funded. And I don't think she would have been able to do that with so much gusto and confidence if she didn't have those guidelines. And so thank you, because it was absolutely an awesome moment.
Yeah, I love those stories, and that's what keeps you coming back every day for more. Is like, what are we doing that helps executives to be successful? So, thank you for sharing that. It's a great story.
Awesome. All right. So, segue. This is kind of like the stuff that Stephen does every year. You meet with awesome executives, you find out what are the things that they struggle with, and you come up with solutions. We talked about monetizing customer success, but this year you actually doubled down on a real problem that you've heard from several members of yours. What was the problem?
Metrics, and more specifically, voice of the customer metrics. So, one of the things we ask in our benchmark is, do you use net promoter scores? Do you use customer satisfaction scores? Do you use customer effort scores? And what's been interesting is just listening to executives complain about specifically net promoter score. So, I don't know about you, Reed, when it came out in mid 2000s, I was excited. I was like, this is a great metric. Holy cow. Because we were kind of starting our as a service journey, the company I was with at the time. And we were like, how do you measure companies' success? And we didn't have much in terms of a metric. And when that came out by Fred Reichheld, who's at Bain and Company, we're like, this is the Holy Grail. But you fast forward now into 2024, it's not the Holy Grail anymore. Tech companies have become pretty mature. They've got good metrics now that can help them run the business. And what we are hearing day in and day out is that NPS is one of those metrics that just won't go away. CS executives are like, I don't use it. I can't run the business off of it. But because my executive suite or marketing or sales likes it, we have to use it.
It's just not cutting it anymore. There's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of people that say, no, we shouldn't even track it anymore. But there's nothing else that can replace it potentially or actually allow for these results. So, Stephen, what did you do about it? Did you come up with something?
I did. I came up with something that I think may scratch the itch. So I've come up with what I've called the core score. I got to thinking about what is it that executives and customer success are trying to figure out. And they're trying to figure out basically four things because they have to run the business. So what I had to do is I had to put aside data and telemetry and metrics that are about customer health, how they're benchmarking, how they rack and stack against other companies. I had to kind of put that aside, and I had to think about what the executives and customer success are asking. And they're like, we're trying to figure out outcomes. Are the customers getting their outcomes? Are they going to stay with us, which is retention? Are they going to spend the same amount of money, which is renewal? And would they be a positive reference? So Core Score came about, and it is an acronym. And the acronym stands for Keeping Organizational Outcomes, Retention, Renewals, References, and Reputation Excellent. When I started looking at trajectory, because we just wrapped up 2023. So when you look at the decline, you can see that NPS is on its way down. It kind of peaked in 2021 as the metric that's being used. And you can see customer effort scores on the increase, which was a little bit different. It's not a relationship score like NPS. NPS is a relationship score. Would you refer us to a friend, family, or colleague? That's the question. And that's the Fred Reichheld from Bain and Company. Customer effort score is more transactional. So we see that one rising predominantly because people are figuring out we're asking the wrong questions. We're asking the wrong questions at the wrong time in people's journey. I'll give you an example. My bay windows in my house are leaking profusely, and it's raining today. We had window companies come over to our house to give us quotes. And the guy from one of the companies at the end of giving me a quote said, hey, you're going to get a survey and I want you to fill it out. And if you don't give me a 9 or 10, I'm going to lose my job. And I'm like, wait, what? Are we talking about the net promoter score? And he goes, what is that? And I said, the question of what's the likelihood that you would recommend me to a friend, family, or colleague? Yeah, that's the one. So give me a 9 or 10, I'm going to lose my job. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Wrong question at the wrong time in the journey. I haven't given them my business. I haven't said I'm going to do business with you. I'm just trying to collect a quote. And then I'm being blackmailed, pushed up against the wall and said, hey, give me a 9 or 10 or I'm going to lose my job. Wrong question, wrong time in the journey. Tech companies are no different. You can't forecast renewals or retention. I loved it when you were talking about how when the score came in that you had to turn around and go talk to the customer because you were confused. I was like, you're speaking my language. I mean, I hear that from executives all the time. It's unreliable, and the amount of treasure that companies have to spend to go figure out what was the customer trying to do here by giving us a 10 and then not renewing, or giving us a 1 and then telling us in the subsequent comments that they loved us. Very confusing. So what I tried to do, Irid, is I tried to create a new framework here. And the framework was looking at basically 4 questions that we could ask in the core score. And the first and foremost is looking at what's the likelihood you're going to remain a customer? That's the retention question. And you read some execs will say, well, retention and renewal are the same thing. Well, I hear that argument all the time, but I do a different point of view, which is you can retain a customer, but they may not stay with you, meaning they have to downsell because of budget cuts. So if they've spent $100 with you, they may downsell and only renew at $50. And for a CS executive, that's hard because now I've got the retention, which counts towards my volume churn predictions and forecasts. But now I got $50 versus $100 that affects my renewal. So the question we're asking here is, what's the likelihood you're going to remain a customer? And then the next question is, what is the likelihood you're going to renew at least 100%, meaning full value of your upcoming renewal? What do you think so far?
Thinking absolutely the first one makes a lot of sense. This one is suggesting whether we're going to lose some of the pie or increase it. So this is the difference between your retention and renewals. In my language, it would be renewal and expansion, or detraction of the cash flow coming in. How many times do we send customer surveys and ask them, did you use this feature? Did you use that feature? And to impact the product roadmap, how many software companies actually ask this question? At the most that I've heard that some companies ask, would you actually renew, yes or no? They can kind of get the sentiment, but this is a killer question.
And you notice we're asking, given 5 types of responses. We took the burden that Fred Reichheld created with 11. A lot of people forget about 0. 0 plus all these others adds up. Do you have an 11-point scale? And most organizations were like, do I need 7 points to figure out that I'm doing bad? We're trying to keep it simple. The next one we're going to ask here, again, thinking about a company that doesn't have the telemetry figured out, what is the likelihood your company would be a positive reference? And we're saying company policy aside, because some companies, they're forbidden to do references. You put that aside, what's the likelihood you're a positive reference? And that is the true difference between the ultimate question, which is, what's the likelihood you would recommend? The key word is recommend. It's not positive or negative. You can negatively refer somebody. So that's a problem. So we were very intentional in saying, what's the likelihood you'll be a positive reference? And then the last one we asked here, which is, this one is the creme de la creme that everyone just jumps on. It's like, this is what we're missing. What's the likelihood that your company has already or will receive the expected value and outcome? And that aligns to what customer success is all about. The home of customer success is an adoption. Adoption done well leads to expansion and retention. Adoption done poorly leads to churn. Well, in order to figure out if you're doing adoption right, you got to find out, have we delivered the expected value and outcome? These are the 4 questions that I looked at. And then I had to stop and think about it, which is, okay, a company that has no metrics, they're going to need to ask all 4 questions. But a company that's a little bit more mature, they may only need to ask some of the questions. And then a company that's very mature, they may already have all the metrics. So how does this framework help them? So if you take a look at the framework for a nascent organization, let's ask all 4 questions. And if you follow the quadrants the way they're intended, the least important is here, moves up to the most important. So the most important question I'm now saying is, what's the likelihood you're going to get the value and outcome achievement? And if you add all of these up and divide it by 4, then that gives you your core score, which is your brand awareness, what traditionally NPS would do. So if we put numbers to that and we said, okay, we get the scores back from the customer, and these are legitimate numbers that they've given us, then we know that our core score is a particular number. And what NPS never did is it never told you that on that 200-point scale, positive 100, negative 100, that if your score was a 30, was that good? And Fred Reichheld, a lot of his comments would be, well, it depends on the industry you're in. For that industry, it can be this range, but you never knew. If you get a 4.0 or a 4 point something, does that land you in good, improvement, or poor in terms of your productivity?
I mean, I can guess that a 1 is not great and a 4 is definitely not poor. So, you have some common sense here, but I assume that you've done it with multiple companies and you can benchmark. Just like NPS, we know, okay, if it's 70, that's extremely good for, I don't know, this industry. But if you're 40, that's already very good for a different industry. And I think that's what you're alluding to, depending on the industry that you're in, or the size of your organization, or the maturity of your organization. Maybe there's a different benchmark, and it's not going to be a whole number, but rather 4.22 is great for this type of companies, but 3.8 is great for that, right? Am I in the right direction? Is what
You're
you're
in the
alluding
right
to?
direction. Yeah, we tested this last year with our customer success research advisory board. So think of top 20 tech leaders in the industry, and they ran through this and providing feedback and telling me where my baby was ugly and what needed to improve. So we've definitely taken good feedback, but this is definitely something we'll continue to monitor and look at. We've got some recommendations. You're absolutely right. It's not going to be a whole number. We've broken this down into decimals of where you should be performing to find yourself in a good category, improving, poor. So, and then we have to think about this even one step further.
Well, this is fascinating. I love this. It's obviously extremely thoughtful and very astute. So thank you for sharing this. What if
Yeah.
somebody wanted to embrace that? I guess they can always run a survey and see how they score, but I think the big deal here is to know how you benchmark against others that are your size or your maturity level as a company or your industry. Wouldn't you say that that's sort of like the core of it?
Yeah, so that's the next question. Companies that are currently currently doing NPS today, when they join TSIA, the first thing that they want to know is what's the industry standard? What's the score to beat? Who's got the pacesetter score? And we never reveal the who because we protect everybody's identity that benchmarks with us. So you'll never know who, but you'll know what the metric is or what the score is. So right now, that's what we're looking at helping inform the industry. When you benchmark with us, we're now going to incorporate the core score in for companies that are doing this, that are actually doing the core score. And we'll start letting them know how they rack and stack against the industry. And as we start seeing this momentum change, we may or may not have a freemium offer to provide with that. Right now, we don't. It's strictly for TSI members. But we do think that this would give great opportunities for CX executives to navigate that unknown, where they have a sense of confidence going into their executive team about, hey, this is the type of metrics that help inform my decision. Will it be within 1% to 3%? I hope so. That was my intent, because as a former practitioner, I haven't always been a researcher. I was a 3 times CS executive. I want to be within 1% to 3% of my forecast, and I want to be tight. And I can't have a vague NPS question as that telemetry. And I got to make sure that I'm targeting the right audience. So the next question is, who should be getting this survey? Well, you got to ask the people that you're doing business with. And we did research and we asked customer success in the industry who should be getting these surveys. And their response, hands down, was these 4: executive sponsor, business owner, technical owner, champion. And when I looked at this, I thought it was going to be the first 3, but the industry spoke. Champion was a tie with the technical owner.
I could definitely see why the vocal people they're the one that keep you as a vendor in play for their tech stack.
Then the question becomes survey fatigue. What if we don't get responses back? I always told my CSMs when I was running CS organizations, I'm like, if we don't have relationships at these levels, you're going to have survey fatigue. They're not going to respond. But if we've got the right relationships developed, then there's a higher probability we're going to get these types of people responding, because they appreciate the fact that we're adding value, that we're trying to help them. It comes from asking questions. Like if we get too low in an organization, you got to ask questions that person can't answer. You got to get to their boss and their boss to where you get up to these levels, because when they see that you're helping them, they're going to want to engage with you more.
Absolutely. And I bet you have a framework in place for what best practices looks like in order to get the voice of the customer somewhere. in the TSIA wonderful archive of best practices and industry standards.
We do. One of the things that we also thought about is how do you get the right type of survey in front of everybody? And I'll just go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. One of the things that we did last year is when we were sending out basically transactional surveys, one of the things that we found is when we switched to saying, if you complete the survey, we will donate to your charity of choice. And we gave them like 5 global charities to choose from. Our response rate went up 50%. 50% because everybody was motivated to, hey, this isn't about me getting a $5 Amazon gift card or a $5 Starbucks. This is about me taking a survey that somebody's going to get some money and it's going to go to a worthwhile charity that I get to choose.
Yeah, it's funny, but I do believe like some sort of an incentive that makes sense, that plays to the heart of the person that's going to dedicate the time is effective. I'd say there's like a few more that I heard is closing the loop. So they did leave a comment or requested something, close the loop. Hey, we actually listened. And if it's in the SMB, you show that you maybe listen to another client so that they know that you're actually looking at the results. Some told me, it's the way you serve the surveys. Sometimes you need to do it in app. You get higher percentages, like maybe uplift of 1 or 2%. Talk about the survey. Talk about why is it important for you. Create an enrollment conversation with the executive and share the results with them. And even some of them took the time to show a client how their response is benchmarked against other clients, which is always interesting, I think, for an executive. There's like a ton of stuff that companies can do to increase response rate. And we certainly have a few videos on our YouTube, and at CSM Practice, we have worked with clients to improve response rate. So I'm very passionate about that. But I think that whether you ask these questions through a QBR, analyze the data you already have, or send out a survey for the smaller cohort, regardless, you're going to get lots of insights. I love this framework. I love everybody that comes out of TSIA, whether it's books, frameworks, benchmark and survey data. You guys are absolutely killing it.
I totally love geeking out with you on these conversations. Just so your audience knows, if we don't say this later, I want to make sure everybody knows that you're going to be at the TSIA Conference in Orlando, and you're going to be on our panel talking about customer success and artificial intelligence and customer success. And I always learn from you. So I'm blessed to get to be on your channel with you and talk with you. So I always learn from every time I'm in your presence. So excited for what you're going to be sharing as a part of our panelists, also talking about how customer success has got to be thinking about artificial intelligence in their delivery process. So.
Yeah, I'm excited about that panel. And if anybody wants to give the conference a try, you've never been, I think it's quite tremendous. It's one of the conferences that I love going to the most, and I haven't missed any since 2016, I want to say, when I first became a partner with TSIA. You want to join any TSIA conference, even down the road, you're watching it a year or two after we recorded, they have it twice a year. Link up with me on LinkedIn, send me a private message. I will give you a code, a discount code, so that you can try it for the first time if you've never been to one before. I think you're going to be just feeling like it's the most awesome thing you've ever done in your life. The content is top notch. And then reach out to me if you are coming, because it would be awesome to just connect in person. All right, everyone, if you got something out of this core framework, you had an aha moment, type it in the comment below. What did you get the most out of it? What are you going to do next? I'm curious to see. If you want to learn more about TSIA, reach out to Steven on LinkedIn or go to TSIA website and submit a contact us form. I'm sure they'll be delighted to share more about how their membership works. And if you aren't even a member, but you do want to go to the conference, direct message me and I'll hook you up. Thank you, Steven, so much for coming on the podcast. It's always so much fun to have you, and you're such a gracious, wonderful, smart man.
Thank you for having me, Ari.
Everyone, I'll see you at the next video. Don't forget to subscribe and push that notification button so you don't miss out on any future videos.